Have you ever thought of becoming a sales engineer? What path would you need to take to get there? A few episodes ago, I shared that a tech industry expert, Cortez Adams, said his favorite role he ever had was being a sales engineer. Now hear from 6 individuals who took 6 different paths to land that role. Do me a favor, let me know which story resonates with you, and let me know what nuggets you learned from each story in the comments section below. But before we start the show, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you find any value along the way. Now, let's begin.
Yeah, sure. So, like you mentioned, I'm Alexis. So I actually grew up in Delaware, believe it or not. I was born and raised in Delaware. And the reason being, my dad, when he was married my mom, that's where he was stationed. So we're Dover. Yep, exactly. So interestingly, I don't know if you've been, but there's not a lot going on. It's a very rural, suburban area. There's only 3 counties in the whole state. I did have dichotomous upbringing since my family was from Hoboken. My mom's very close to her family, so I was going up there quite a bit. So I did get to see 2 sides of the coin as a young child, and going to visit my Puerto Rican side, I still got a lot of that culture. Tech was never something that really spoke to me growing up at all. My dad was kind of a tech nerd. He definitely had his computer room. He was into video games. He actually now, in his retirement from the military, he now works in IT. So he's always been kind of into that, but I was always more of a creative. My sister and I both got those genes from our dad. He's a very eclectic individual, but I knew from an early age that I actually wanted to major in writing whenever I went to college. And so I had that thought in my head. So when I did get to college, it wasn't even a second thought. I didn't even think about what am I going to do with this? I just was like, I had this vision. I knew I wanted to pursue writing. And so I actually was a creative writing major in college, and I focused a lot on poetry. I actually used to perform spoken word when I was in school, whole 9, a lot of finger snaps. And so it really wasn't, honestly, until I got into the working world. So after college, I had that come to Jesus moment senior year where I was like, I need a job. All my friends were getting jobs, especially those in the financial industry, because they get jobs early. And I was like, what do I want to do? And so I had this idea since I didn't want to be a starving artist. I wanted to make money. I was like, maybe I should go into publishing, right? Like that seems to be the natural progression. Yeah. So funnily enough, I don't know if you are familiar with Pearson. They make all the textbooks. So that one of their HR reps happened to come to my campus one day. I literally went to that session, resume in hand, and I was like, I'm Alexis, here's my resume. So I ended up working for Pearson as an editorial assistant, and quickly got advice from my manager that I should spend time in sales if I wanted to move up in that industry. Just believe it or not, that's the nature of academic publishing, is everybody who works their way up spends time in sales. It's definitely a different world, publishing, and especially academic publishing. I never would have thought I would have worked in it, and I worked in that industry for about 5 years. That was one of the best pieces of advice I got, because I went into sales. I actually moved to Raleigh, North Carolina at that time as a field sales rep. It was kind of towards the end of my tenure in sales where I started to think about tech, or like midway, because I spent about 3.5 years, and I started seeing other people that were moving into tech, or friends of mine from college who were in tech. And this was 2016. It was hard to ignore the amount of money they were making, because I didn't have a background or any experience in tech. I actually at the time started doing a master's program part-time online in digital media design, just to kind of get my foot in the academic space, because when you look at my resume, I mostly writing. I wanted to diversify myself. And so that's then I started kind of thinking about tech and started, making those plans.
I'm Lebanese, not original Lebanese. I'm still Lebanese Canadian. And in Lebanon, my interests were sports and computers. And my dad kind of pushed me towards computers. I decided to come to Canada for university because it was cheaper than the US. And I got in as a civil engineer, because turns out civil engineering needs a lower GPA or lower high school grades than communications or computer engineering. So I came in as a civil engineer to study civil engineering, and then I switched after the first year to communications. Graduated in 2009 when everything was falling apart, I guess, in the world. Got a job through a barbecue as a support engineer at a company called Alcatel-Lucent. Became a support engineer, did network design engineering. Then in 2014, I switched into What the title of my title, official title, was systems engineering, but the actual role was sales engineering. And I've been there since. I haven't been with that company since, but I've been in sales in one way, shape, or form. I am one of the rare people who got a job in what I graduated in as a communications engineer at Alcatel-Lucent. I did my internship at a company called Nortel Networks.
Oh,
I don't know. Yeah. And that was in 2007, 2008. And I was promised a job when I get back. I was even their campus ambassador. So I had their t-shirts, their bags, I had all their swag, and I would walk around university. It's like, yeah, Nortel is great and whatever. And then one day someone walks up to me and is like, hey, Ramzi, what are you going to do now that Nortel went bankrupt? I'm like, what do you mean they went bankrupt? It's on the news. I guess I have to go read the news. So Nortel went bankrupt in my last year of university, and my guaranteed job was no longer guaranteed. So I was jobless for like 4 months after university. I had applied for master's. I was accepted for master's. So I was getting paid a little bit from master's degree, but I wanted a job. I didn't want to do master's. I went to a barbecue for my hometown in Lebanon, and I was wearing my Nortel shirt. And the lady from Alcatel-Lucent just started chatting with me. It's like, hey, oh, you work at Nortel? I'm like, no, I'm looking for a job. It's like, oh, we're looking for someone. Like, I'm it. It was a Sunday afternoon. Sunday night, I had sent her my resume. They had scheduled my interview. So Monday, I got called. They said the interview was on Tuesday. Monday night, I went over to that lady's house, and she coached me on the interview process.
Wow.
So I went the next day, and I aced the interview, and there was a competition between me and someone else who was referred by another person in the company, and in the end I got the job.
That was quick.
But that's when I learned that resumes don't get you jobs, because in those 4 months I had applied for maybe 1,000 jobs. I just go on Cisco's website, apply Alcatel-Lucent, apply everywhere I could find a job. I would apply in Canada, outside of Canada. One barbecue got me a job.
Going back to how I got to where I'm at, I would say if I could boil it down, it'd be curiosity. Being frank, I'm born in Bulawayo, Zimbabwe, the youngest of 3. Came to the States at a super young age. But I think what Drake said it best, it's not about who did it first, it's about who did it best. So I was always curious on trying to find new ways to whether outdo my siblings or find new innovative ways to be more effective or really reduce the work or reduce the effort needed to come to the same conclusion. And with that mindset, that really led me to jump into the field of engineering. I've always loved to break things down and use that curiosity, whether if it's, problem solving and all of that stuff kind of combined. And with that, during my time in school at UNT, University of North Texas, shout out to the Birds, Hawks, something like that. I got a degree with mechanical and energy engineering. And though I was super excited about that, I felt different, just to be frank. I felt that my real passion was with the connection of people. And I found that by working at Nordstrom. I was a stylist at Nordstrom for about 4 years during my time. And I wanted to really blend both worlds. I wanted to take my love for people, my love for interactions, my love for just that relationship selling, and apply that with my background of technical and understanding and problem solving. And that's where I rolled into the role of sales/solutions engineer early, right out of college. No experience in the space, just jumped in. And ever since then, I've been in multiple different industries. I've been a top performer in multiple different industries and have been able and been blessed to really be a support system and then access to other individuals wanting to do the same.
I am Tamara, as you guys can see, and I grew up in Jamaica. So my family is Caribbean. So I'm a Caribbean American person. I moved from Jamaica by myself to live in the States. I was pretty much on my own in a sense. And I think I have to start there because that's where I developed a lot of grit. Having such a stable upbringing, I think it caused me to find stability within. So when I moved to the States, a lot of things opened up. I was very much interested in choir because we had choir in Jamaica, but it wasn't to the level of how things were here. And so when I went to academy, I was like, oh my gosh, I could be in the choir, and they sing choral music. And I was super excited about that. And then we had someone come and talk to us about their major, which was in music. And I had my first voice lesson with this beautiful, amazing singer, Brandy Sutton, calling her out, shouting her out. You guys should look her up in a city near you. She sings everywhere. And that was where I was introduced to opera. And I just knew that that's what I wanted to do. That's how my journey started. I went to undergrad for music performance. Then I went to grad school, and eventually I attempted to earn my doctorate in it. And as any story goes, I was singing and I fell in love and then ended up in a different country. But sadly, that was not a very healthy situation for me. And out of that situation, out of that marriage, I had a daughter. So this is where things started to pop up. This is where I started to think, what can I do? How can I get myself into a secure situation, a safe situation? And how can I provide for my daughter? I loved music, but until you're at a certain level, you have to fund your career. So I always had tons of jobs that I used to fund my career. So I would say, I say I'm an opera singer and that was my profession, but my daytime job is really whatever I could do to give me money. And so that included teaching, clerical types of jobs, sales jobs. And so I looked at all of this experience, and that's when I started to come up with what I could do. What is it that can get you from point A to point B? First thing I thought was, I don't want to be doing something really boring. I need to be in a career that still uses my brain and I'm creative, and I want to incorporate all of those things. So the first stop was UX design. And I still am very much interested in that. However, the situation that I was in called for me to make a switch more rapidly. And so I started thinking about things that I already had. What were my unique traits? What kind of soft skills have I gained from all of my career experience, or all of my job experience, should I say? And that is how I stumbled upon pre-sales, or being a sales engineer, solutions consultant.
He's a New Yorker from the Bronx. Super proud of being from the Bronx, and have lived a little bit all over the place. Miami, Florida, Berlin, Paris, and New York. You know, it's really funny. I studied everything to do with the complete opposite. So basically, since I was 6, one of the things that always interested me were people, cultures, languages, politics to a certain degree. And so what was important for me was always doing something that helped others. I wasn't exactly sure what that was going to be, but from a really early age, I knew that I wanted to involve languages. And so I actually ended up studying in college in my bachelor's degree, political science and Arabic. And then I got my master's in intercultural conflict management. So from a studying perspective, it really went with what I thought I wanted to do, which at one point was UN, work in politics. And as I was doing my bachelor's and was ready to get my first job at a college, as most people do, I ended up getting a job, which was a sales management rotational program at a company called Avaya. They're a pretty large telecoms company. Some of you might know Cisco. They're our largest competitor in the US. And so I got to understand a lot about business as a whole. I worked in sales, I worked in customer success, I work in what's called technical customer success. And that is where I realized I knew nothing about technology. And I was just so out of my depth, and I felt uncomfortable. And it's something that I had never felt before. And the reason I felt that is because most of my life, anytime I learned something, it came fairly easily. However, that wasn't the case when it had to do with tech. And even going to college, I took an intro to computer class and I almost failed that, and was like, I'm never going to do anything to do with technology or computers. But as I had my first job, it seemed to me that everyone spoke in code. Everyone knew what a certain acronym was, what a POC was, and I was like, a person of color? And so all these words and phrases and acronyms just made me feel so out of the loop. And it was a feeling I had promised myself I never wanted, having been born and raised in the Bronx, where I always felt a little bit like that. And so I wanted to learn something technical at that point. I just wasn't sure what that was. And while I was doing this, I had also been applying to my master's program in Germany. I decided to go to Germany to do a Master's of Arts in Intercultural Conflict Management. But while I was there, I still knew I want to learn something technical. Even if I work in politics, the idea at the time was that even if I work in politics, all jobs are becoming more technical. I should learn something. I had been volunteering for 3 years at a refugee shelter. And while I was volunteering at the refugee shelter, I became aware of a program that taught refugees to code. So programming, web developer. And I just spoke to the person who was heading the program. And I told them that I was really interested in learning how to code, but I was a student. I certainly didn't have the $25,000 that it cost to take that program. It was a 1-year boot camp, so much longer than traditional. And I basically bartered. I said, listen, here's some set of skills that I have. A lot of tech jobs in Germany, especially in Berlin, are in English. Most of the people that you're training don't have English as a second language. I'm happy to help with coaching, with mock interviews, with resumes, with cover letters, whatever you need. I'm happy to help throughout this entire year.
Oh, so you do German as well?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Not fluently, but after living there for 3 years, I could definitely have some conversations.
Oh my.
And so I basically bartered, and I was able to learn how to code for free. And I ended up helping them with the skills that I had, that I already knew that I had and that I was good at. And then I just started applying for jobs after that. But one thing to know is when I had my first job out of college, I met a sales engineer. So I had heard the term, I just didn't know what they did. I thought the word engineer, the person I had met looked like he was coding all day. So for me, I was like, there's no difference. I ended up finding a job for a German company in New York, and they wanted their first sales engineer. And I applied and was really lucky that I got it, but I also played to the strengths that had nothing to do with technology and everything to do with the cultural element. The fact that I lived in Germany for 3 years, the fact that I spoke some German and made the, I would almost say, wrong assumption that no one in the New York office spoke German, and I was right. But I made that assumption and that in the interview, like, no one here speaks German or understands German culture. As someone who's lived here for 3 years, I think that would be one of my strongest assets, taking aside or away from like the requirements for this job, and I ended up getting it. So I got really lucky.
Human resources was something I took in college, and coming straight out of college, it made sense back in the early 90s. But I was also a nerd. So I always had a bit of a computer side to me, even though I was kind of part of the HR team. And so it took a little while. I had an HR position at one company, and then I went to another company. And that company gave me a chance to do a couple of different things. And while I was there, from tech support to development to implementation of their products, I got a lot of knowledge. So I think the combination of knowledge, computer savviness, and also people, like I like people. I'm kind of a people person. I found that common blend inside of pre-sales. And so a couple of friends around me said, hey, you're pretty good with people. But I'm like, no, I don't want to be in sales. And then I found out you could be a nerd that talks to people. So I'm like, that's what pre-sales is. And that fit me perfectly. So I made that transition probably 7 years into my career. It really has to go with seeing somebody else do it. Because quite frankly, I did not know this role existed, right? It's not like I went to school for it. I went to school for HR. But if I quickly tell you my story, I remember being on the support desk at this company, helping customers through the phone all the time, having good customer service. I feel customers like talking to me. And I had a really challenging customer, actually a big name customer. I don't even know if I'm to name the name, but it's the company that runs Leafs and the Raptors. And so just picture all the events that they do there. It's a pretty big name company here in Toronto. And so they needed extra support. So I went on site. And while I was on site, they had somebody that was essentially a pre-sales person. And him and I had conversations, and I came up with a solution. He goes, come on site with me. I'm like, so this is what you do? You come on site and you see customers and you just kind of help them? This is pretty cool. So because I saw somebody doing that and I realized I get out the office, I can help people in person. I didn't go to it right away, but that's the thing. That was the impetus to the transition. And then really it was just about hanging out with more salespeople and eventually going, yeah, let me try it out. And once an opening happened in the company, I was there, like I said, almost 7 years by the time I finally took the pre-sales job. Networking is the key for sure. And in fact, I did do a stint in sales at one of the salespeople I worked with. And he's like, why don't you just get into sales? You really know how to sell this product. So after a while of doing pre-sales for a while, I go, let me take the pre out of it and just be sales, right? Let me take on the bag, as they call it, the quota. Boy, was that some pressure, because it was like, where's your forecast? Where's your next deal? And I did well. I actually did make my number, and I went to President's Club. And so nice. People were like, you're pretty good at this. But it wasn't my heart. My heart was always in helping people with the solution, not always in the contract and all of that. So I decided to leave that company, went to another company, much bigger company, and learned the pre-sales as a real profession. Up till then, I did what I knew, versus when I went to this other company that had a whole program around it and all the books and really strong training. So then I really realized that this is my profession now. I'm not a salesperson. I'm a pre-sales person. And I'm true, this is what I'll do for any company. So that's why I don't have to name companies. I just love what I do.
Now that was it. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget, if you find any value, to like, comment, and subscribe. And I'm pretty sure you'll like to check out this video as well. See you on the other side.